Hello, my name is Grace Tarantino, and today I will be talking to you about GDP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, which measures the total income earned in the economy and the total expenditure on the economy output of goods and services. In simpler terms, GDP is the total value of everything produced by all the people and companies in the country. GDP helps us to measure the size of a country's economy by looking at standard of living and productivity. GDP is also a quick way for us to compare one country's economy to another. So why does GDP matter to people like you and me? Well, GDP determines our standard of living or quality of life, an element that greatly affects our happiness. GDP also gives us access to opportunities in life, most of which we take for granted, such as wealth, comfort, material goods, and basic necessities. Not only does GDP matter for us, it also matters for international investments. The World Bank, whose mission is to reduce poverty around the globe, uses GDP to determine which countries need help and how much help they need. Based on their GDP value, countries get directed to different sectors of the bank that offer different interest rates. Countries with a low GDP per capita would gain more attention, cheaper loans, and sometimes even free money. However, GDP is not as straightforward as it seems. The United Nations has even gone as far as to call it a statistical illusion. GDP values can actually change by the day, and what a GDP means in one country can be completely different from what it means in another country. This concept is exactly what the Teach Planet Monkey podcast, When a Poor Country Gets a Lot Richer, addresses. It says that differences between countries' GDP have to do with the way it is calculated, because GDP is measured differently in different countries. This podcast does a good job of illustrating GDP as they discuss what it really means to a country and not just on paper. In the United States, GDP is constantly being measured and updated using data from businesses, the IRS, and financial statements. In countries like Ghana, who don't have similar resources, GDP may be calculated in dimly lighted and run-down buildings containing very few computers. 1993 was Ghana's last GDP calculation since 2010, and from then it's just been guesswork. This may cause problems with accuracy because within that time, Ghana has gone from a dictatorship to a pseudo-democracy, as well as an agricultural-based economy to a more urbanized, service-oriented economy. Ghana has also undergone technological advancements such as the introduction of the mobile phone. According to the Teach Monkey Planet podcast, When a Poor Country Gets a Lot Richer, once Ghana reassessed their GDP in 2010, their GDP had doubled in size. This was a result of the many discovered underground economies that greatly impacted Ghana's economic growth. During the reassessment, it was found that there was a lot more lawyers, barbers, taxi drivers, and roadside restaurants than expected. Even though on paper their GDP had doubled in a year, this was simply a change in the number, not in the reality of Ghana's standard of living. This increase in GDP transferred Ghana's numerical status from a low-income to a middle-income country. This would mean that bank aids from international companies such as the World Bank would slowly come to an end. As you can see, the inaccurate translation of GDP as a number to reality has the potential to hurt poor countries on the rise like Ghana. In general, what we can take away from this podcast is that GDP can be a useful tool, but it is an imperfect measure in some cases. Because GDP relies on official data, it does not take into account the extent of the underground economy, which can be significant in some nations. GDP also emphasizes economic output without considering economic well-being. Therefore, GDP growth alone cannot measure a nation's development or its citizens' well-being.